you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today I'm going to be giving you the update to the Murder of Fire build, the Stamina Dragonknight DPS build specifically. There are some changes to this build. If you are already familiar with it, you're probably in a safe place already, so don't panic too much. If you've not seen it before, then of course, obviously this is going to be a little bit new. But for both, I am going to go over everything in detail as to what you should be using, why it works the way it does, how it works, and all the shininess involved. So, just like every other guide, I'm going to give all the information, not just all the gear and no idea. None of that stuff. So, first of all, I'm going to go over the stats. Now, the weapon damage is a little different because there is a glyph we're using that will change it, but we'll get to that in a second. So, we're sitting on 10k Magicka, which isn't too bad. 20.7k health, 37.5k max stamina. We're sitting on 4.3k weapon damage with 51% crit. Now, I know the crit's a little bit low in comparison to how I usually work on stamina, but this particular build doesn't need the additional crit because we're using a lot of procs which can't crit. Resists are sitting on almost 15k alongside 11 physical. All points into stamina. Using the Warrior Munderstone, that by the way does have an alteration which I'll come to in the video as well. Stage 4 Vampire all the way, and we're using max health and max stamina food. Now, I mentioned that your weapon damage goes up. Don't worry about the stamina recovery, we are fine with our recovery. It's sitting on, let's buff up properly with a potion, 4.3k, so 4326. But if I make this work, there we go, 4995, and that's quite consistent as well. We're using an infused weapon, which I will get to, so our weapon and spell damage glyph is on pretty much most of the time. Not all the time, but most of it. So that's a fairly consistent number before any additional buffs as well. But we'll get to all that shininess. First of all, we're going to go into the skills. Now, I know there were some procs that happened then that some of you may or may not be familiar with. Don't worry, I'm going to get to all that. First of all, Venomous Claw. Now, this is in the Ardent Flame skill line. Second ability you unlock, so you get it quite quickly. And this is our main damage over time single target ability. It's very, very powerful indeed. 17, almost 18k damage over 10.5 seconds, excluding crits. And not only that, while it's on the target, every 2 seconds it gets progressively stronger by 12%. So 12% additional damage every 2 seconds. This is very, very powerful. Make sure you keep it on the target at all times. Now, this starts off as a fire ability, but you want to morph it to this poison morph instead. It's very, very cheap as well. Can I get a target to give you an example? No, because we just killed it. You'll do. Looks like that. See the claw? And don't spam it like this. Don't spam it, there's no need to. It's a 10-second duration, 10.5, and obviously if it goes for its full duration, it does the most amount of damage it can. Second, Beast Trap. This is in, it's actually Rearming Trap. This is in Fighter's Guild. It's the last one you unlock, so you do need Fighter's Guild 8, I believe, to unlock this, but it's very, very powerful indeed. Puts a trap down on the floor. There's a decent amount of physical damage over 6 seconds, excluding crits, of course, and while it's active, you are given a buff, Minor Force, which increases any critical damage you do by 10%. We do have a decent amount of crit. We will be critting quite a lot with our major skills and dots and stuff that we've got running. This is very, very powerful indeed. Not only that, but this is morphed into Rearming Trap for a reason. Basically, not only does it sit down for the first 6 seconds, but once it pops and stuns the target, you get the buff, and it will rearm itself 6 seconds later and go again. So you get 12 seconds, not 6. However, I know people are a bit worried, especially if you're not familiar with the skill. This doesn't stun bosses, of course, but it does still do the damage, and it does still give you the buff, so it's very, very powerful indeed. Also, once that is fired off, you can actually place down another one, so you can have 2 running at once. But that one has to arm itself first before you can place a new one. Very, very powerful. Keep that up all the time. Next skill is Flames of Oblivion. Now, this is not a tricky skill, but it can sometimes be misunderstood. Now, obviously, as you can see, this costs Magicka to cast, so you would assume that with it being flame damage and it costing Magicka, that it will work basically off of max magic. Technically, as far as flame damage is concerned, that is true. However, this particular skill is a little different. If you go into here, it takes a longer time to unlock this. You want some of these abilities on your bar, first of all, to unlock it, but you morph it into Flames of Oblivion. Now, this will give you major savagery while it's slotted, so you'll get 10% increase to your crit chance. We do use pots anyway, so we do have that buff all the time, but if your potions have run out or if you can't afford them or whatever, we do have this on our bow all the time, so it does give us that bonus constantly. But what this does is when you activate it, it fires a fireball initially, as long as you've aggroed a target, and then once every 5 seconds for 15 seconds it will fire another one. But this is based off of your max resources. So if you are high in magicka, this will base off of your max magicka. If you're high in stamina, this one will base off of your max stamina. Yes, the flame damage is affected by elemental expert and stuff like that if you ever had enough points to put them in there. This particular build we don't. And yes, it does still benefit from spell penetration because it's flame. But the actual raw damage is based off of our higher stat, for us, stamina. It's very, very strong indeed. Now, very simple. Looks like that. Little ball firing around, doing nothing. But once every 5 seconds, it will fire that ball at the target. Let's see if we can find a target to demonstrate this. Probably not. Yes, we can. Now, as you can see, it's not going to hit him. It's not hitting him at all. Just keeps reapplying the buff. But if he's aggressed, it will hit him. Then it'll count down from 5, 2, 1, fire again. Another 5 seconds, it will fire again, and so on and so forth until it runs out. And that, the budgies, don't worry about those. That's something else. We'll get to that. Very, very powerful. Keep this up all the time. It's quite cheap. You don't need to spam it, but if you do press the button to activate it, it will restart the timer, so it will start running again. Deadly Cloak. This is in a dual wield skill line. This is the 4th ability you unlock, and you want to morph this to Deadly Cloak. I think it starts as Blade Cloak. What this will do is this will do a decent amount of damage once every 3 seconds to enemies nearby you. Physical damage, I might add. And also, it reduces any area of effect damage that you take by 25%. So it's very, very powerful. We are squishy. We are using medium. We do want to make sure that we have some form of protection. Obviously, because we're not magical, we don't have a shield. This is basically our way of shielding, is we actually take less damage while this is active. It's very, very strong indeed. Not for single target stuff, but for area of effect damage, it's really, really strong. Blood Craze, this is also in the dual wield skill line. This is the 2nd one you unlock. Morph it to Blood Craze because although this doesn't do the same initial damage as Rend and Slashes, which is slightly more damage, you can see here it does 2.6k physical damage on impact. Rend and Slashes is around 3.5, 4k initially. But the damage over time, the bleed that is attached to it, the 9-second long dot for 12k physical damage, is exactly the same. The only bonus we do get, of course, because the main ability, like the first hit, is less, we actually heal once every 2 seconds for this being on the target. You get 1.2k health almost every 2 seconds. So it's really, really nice to keep your health flowing. Make sure you don't die too quickly. You got to have some form of heal. We do have a heal on the back bar, but this is really, really nice while you're going through your rotations before you get to that bar. Really, really strong indeed. And of course it's a bleed, and bleed ignores physical penetration. So it's really, really good. What do we got now? Dawnbreaker. This is not used as much as our other ultimate, which I will get to. This is one I have on the bar for 3 reasons. One, as a kind of passive, which I'll get to. You can see at the bottom there, it gives you 5% increased weapon damage for being on your bar. So it's very, very strong. I also use it to get resources back if I'm really, really low and I'm about to die. So it's my oh shit button. And also if the target's about to die and I haven't got enough for my major ultimate, I'll hit him with this. When I say I get resources back, if you're not familiar with the Dragonknight, there is a passive that I'm going to come to where the more expensive your ultimate, the more resources you get back. Basically, you get given health, stamina, and magic for using an ultimate, which is why when I get to the passives, that will make a lot more sense. Oh, one more thing. This is in the Fighters Guild skill line. This is the ultimate that you unlock, and you do need to be, I believe, Fighters Guild 10 to get it. Morph it to Flawless Dawnbreaker specifically. The other one has a stun, this one doesn't, but this one does increase your weapon damage while being on your bar. Back bar. Very, very simple. Resolve and Vigor. This is our main heal. Don't spam it though. It belongs in the Assault skill line. You do need Assault level 4 or 5. I think it's 5 actually for this. 4 is Warhorn. Yeah, 5 is this. Go into PvP in Cyrodiil, find a massive Zerg of people and get stuck in. In no time at all, you'll have this unlocked and you can get out and not look back. Unless, of course, you want Caltrops, which is coming in a minute. Or get yourself stuck into some battlegrounds. Just for taking part, you'll get alliance points. It's guaranteed points. Just kind of stick with it until you've got the skills you need and then get out. Unless, of course, you're having fun, in which case stay in. It's up to you. But this is very, very simple. Heals you over 5 seconds. And anyone else in this area. So anyone that reaches that physical effect will be healed as well. But don't spam it. This here, doing this is wrong. It lasts 5 seconds. You can see the duration there. Now you can reapply it if you want to start the timer again, but don't spam it. I see people spamming Vigor, thinking it's going to help them. It won't. It goes once a second. The heals do anyway. Okay, poison injection. This is in the bow skill line. Unfortunately, they moved this a while back, so it used to be up here somewhere. Now it's right at the bottom. So you do need to level up your bow skill a lot before you can unlock this, but this is a crucial skill. This, while it's on the target, will do poison damage over time. However, when the target gets below 50%, the less health it has left, the more aggressive this gets. Up to 260% more damage based on how little health they have left. And of course you can crit it as well, so it gets quite aggressive. It's very, very nice indeed. And with it being poison damage, of course, you can proc a poison status effect, which for those of you that don't know, lots of different damage types have a secondary effect or a status effect that does damage or some kind of effect to the target. Poison is a 6-second damage over time effect, and I'm going to hit this with a poison injection now. Where are you? Now watch. It's going to get stronger. It's hitting him for 4. Oh, it's not. It's not. Hit him with something else. 10k there instead of 4. You see what I mean? It gets a lot stronger than that. But basically, the longer it's on the target, the more damage it will do, because obviously their health is going down. But once it gets a really, really low health, it's very, very strong indeed. So you're going to want this in a minute. I'll get into that. But keep some bow abilities on your bar while leveling up, because it's really, really long to get here. But once you do, you won't regret it. It's really, really good. Starts off as poison arrow. Caltrops. This isn't essential, but I will say that it does a hell of a lot of damage, and I highly recommend getting it. If you don't have this, or you don't plan on going to PvP anytime soon, or you're kind of in between leveling and all the rest of it, I can tell you what we can put here in the meantime. But first of all, I'll start with this. You do need to go again into PvP, unlock this at level 6, I think. And there, it's been a while. And it does this. It's very simple. It's quite expensive though. All these on the ground. Anyone caught inside of here will take damage once a second. And of course the initial hit. Now, a trick to this, which I'll get to in the rotation, is when you fire this, the first hit obviously depends on which weapon you're on, because you'll do more damage on your front bar than you will on your back, because you have 2 weapons instead of 1. However, this is cast on the back, but if you're quick and you switch bars quickly, it will fire on the front. So make sure you swap that one quickly, but I'll explain that when I get to the rotations. Wrong button. Now, if you don't have this unlocked yet, you can use Noxus Breath, which is in the Ardent Flame skill line. Very easy to unlock this. After Venomous Claw, you get Noxus Breath. These are 2 morphs, by the way. They've been upgraded, so they don't start as this. This one starts as Searing Strike, and this one starts as Fiery Breath. A morph it to Noxus Breath. You can put this in place of this instead for the time being, and this will breathe poison on enemies in front of you, and every single one of them will be affected with Major Fracture. If you don't know what that is, that basically reduces their resistance by 5,280, meaning your physical damage will do more to them. Your physical, your disease, and your poison. However, when you have a tank in your group, they will, or they should be, using a taunt. If they're using Pierce Armor, as most do, that Major Fracture will already be applied on the target that they are taunting currently. So you don't necessarily need it for the debuff, but as a starting point, I would recommend using it. Some builds out there use both, but for me, I actually use Caltrops all of the time, so I rely on the debuff from the tank. But like I said, if you don't have this skill unlocked yet, get yourself Noxus Breath on there for the time being. It's less damage on its own in comparison, but it will count towards your DPS overall regardless. It's quite nice. What have we got next? Modern Armaments. What this does is this increases your heavy attack by 40%. Now, it does give us Major Sorcery and our group as well, so up to 6 people, including ourselves, which isn't essential for us, but it is, or maybe is for them. Maybe you've got a couple people that like to use mag pots all the time. They're out of them, and you can keep this buff up on them all the time. That can help. This has some other hidden perks as well, which I'm going to get to in the passives in a moment. But above all, keep this running the whole time. 39.6 seconds. Now I'm going to show you how to utilize it as well and make sure that we get the most out of this. But above all, this is for our heavy attack damage, and we will be heavy attacking. I'll show you that in the rotation. This is a crucial skill. Endless Hail. Now this, of course, is in the bow skill line. I did briefly kind of glaze over this a little while ago. But this is... Oh, I should probably show you what that looks like first. There's Molten Armaments. There you go. Your weapons are on fire. Awesome. Now you can see... in the buff window, you can see the timer, 39 seconds and counting. Keep an eye on that all the time. Okay, back to Endless Hail. This is in the bow skill line. Second one you unlock. It's very, very early on. And what you do with this is you basically just fire it wherever you need to, in a group of ads or under the boss or whatever, and this will tick doing damage once every half a second. It's a very, very fast, very powerful dot. You need to keep this on the ground all the time. It's absolutely incredible. So if you keep this along with this, both down at the same time, you've got some nasty, nasty AoE on the ground. Make sure that doesn't run out, and if it does, make sure you reapply it as fast as possible. Standard of Might. Now, this is our ultimate. Now, this is the one I was talking about that we use above everything else. This, it costs 250 ultimate, so it's very, very expensive. But when I get to the passives, this will make sense, like I said already, as to why we use it, because we get a lot back from it. But not only that, while this is on the ground, it lasts 17 seconds. Everyone caught within the area of it will take fire damage once a second. And we will also increase our damage that we do to the targets. We're in trouble. Hang on. We'll increase our damage to the targets, including the stuff that was already running. That gets boosted as well. And we reduce the damage we take from the enemy as well. So while it's active, we hit harder by 15%. And we take 15% less, so it's very, very strong indeed. It does have major defile attached to it, so the targets can't heal as much, but that's not normally that essential in PvE. Also, this comes with a synergy attached to it, so if any of your allies are near you and they hit the synergy, they will basically chain the targets to the banner, plus do a decent amount of flame damage as well. It's really, really nice, and there's a 5-second immobilize, so it's really, really, really decent. It's even longer than most immobilization skills. I think even the clause is like 4 seconds. Yeah, it's 4 seconds, so it's quite good. But this is our main ultimate. We are going to be using this all the time. Now, there is a switch out for this. If you're in trouble and if you're not too experienced, or if you're going for no death runs and stuff like that, or if you just feel safer with it, you won't get a massive DPS lost in it, but this is different. You can use corrosive armor. Now, this is in the Earth and Heart skill line. You unlock it at level 12. In the Earth and Heart skill line, it costs 200 ultimate, so it is less, but for 10.8 seconds, you do a small area of effect poison damage. All of your attacks ignore physical resistance completely, so the target's on 0 resist, so you're hitting as hard as you can. And also, you can only take a maximum of 3% of your whole health bar per hit from the target, even if it's a boss, unless it's got a one-shot mechanic, which can't be helped. But basically, this is your immortal button for 10 seconds. So if you're doing Maelstrom, or if you're doing Dungeons, or even Trials, if you're comfortable with this and you prefer it over the banner, be my guest, there's no harm in it, it's absolutely fine. It's a really, really strong ability, and sometimes I actually preference it in some situations. This is a little bit more damage and a lot more resources back, but this is your oh shit button, I'm going to die, and now, or you're going to just kill everything. It's really, really powerful. Now, passives. These are the important ones. First of all, you're going to want every single one of these. These all do benefit your damage in some way or another. For example, this here increases the damage of your burning and poison status effects by 50%. We do have some fire on this build, we do have poison, and if you do get the status effects from them, from fire, the secondary effect is that you can put a damage over time ability on the target which burns them. Poison, you get another damage over time ability which does a poison damage for 6 seconds. Both of those two status effects are boosted because we're a Dragonknight by 50%, so they're stronger. We also have an ability to reduce their movement speed. If you use an Ardent Flame abilities, that's not hugely essential, but get it nonetheless. Also increases the duration and the damage of your abilities, your Fiery Breath, your Searing Strike, which is our Venom Claw, and our Noxus Breath, and of course our standard, our banner as well. Increases those by 3% and their duration by 2 seconds, so that's very, very nice as well. And of course increases your damage from your flame and poison area of effect abilities. Now, we're not using many area of effect abilities as far as flame and poison is concerned, but if you are using Noxus Breath or corrosive armor or the banner, all of those will be affected. Draconic Power, we're not actually using any of these at the moment. This is actually what I use for PvP, and this is a resist buff if you choose to slot it, if you need it. But that's a completely different situation. That's not really relevant right now. So I don't use any of these skills, so you don't need all of the passives. This one you will. Increases the amount of damage you can block by 10%. It's very, very useful. You are going to need to block. You got taught it in the tutorial, and if you've forgotten how to do it, hold L2 on your control pad, or however you do it on the PC, whatever you've got your button bound to, make use of that block button. You're going to need it. While Draconic Power ability is active, your healing receives increased by 12%. Now, we don't actually use this, but if you do choose to slot this ability here as a resist buff, because maybe you need it, maybe you feel a bit squishy, then this will benefit you, of course. Health recovery increase, that's not relevant, we're a vampire, and this increases your spell resistance by 3299. This is essential. We do get a big spell resistance bonus as a Dragonknight. I would recommend getting this as soon as possible. Important stuff. This I use in Maelstrom, by the way, just in case anyone was wondering. I use that for all content. I use this for Maelstrom. Increases your duration of the Earth and Heart abilities by 20%. So, your Molten Armament is increased, so it's 39.6 seconds instead of a lesser amount, and Corrosive Armor is 10.8 instead of under 10 seconds. So that's very, very important. Battle Roar, this is the one I was getting to earlier about the ultimates. When you cast an ultimate ability, you restore 46 health, 46 magic, and 46 stamina for every ultimate point that your ability costs. So for every 1 point of this, that's what you get back. And this is 250, so you can see where we get lots and lots and lots of resources back. Of course, our oh shit button, this is only 125. Don't use this all the time. Use this if you honestly think you're going to die and you haven't got enough for one of these. When you cast an Earth and Heart ability, you and your group members within 30 meters gain minor brutality for 20 seconds, increasing your weapon damage by 5%. This is very important. Now, look at the buffs at the bottom. The orange one is Molten Armaments, that's your heavy attack increase and major sorcery for your group. Look at the blue one with the hammer in the middle. That one is minor brutality. Keep an eye on it, and that is why it's important to use this once every 20 seconds, because that's how long the small buff lasts, rather than once every 40, which is the full duration of this one. So, if you kept this up for a full 40 seconds, you would get your increase to heavy attacks, and your team would get major sorcery. But if you reapply this every 20 seconds, you will also all receive minor brutality as well. So it's a little tricky, but you have to keep an eye on it. You cast it twice for its duration, not once. It's a common misconception or a mistake that people do a lot, and you really want to keep that extra buff up because of course your damage will improve. Also, every time you use it, at least every 6 seconds, you can wait longer, but every 6 seconds at least, if you use this while in combat, you will gain 3 ultimate as well. So it gives you minor brutality, it gives you major sorcery and to your group as well, and it gives you your heavy attack increase, and it gives you ultimate. It's a very, very powerful passive and a very powerful skill. You got to use at least one Earth and Heart ability all the time. And of course, for casting that ability, you get back 990 stamina. So our sustain is covered as well. So every second rotation, I'll show you how to use this, you will actually get stamina back. And if you get in trouble, you can pop it a couple times and get some more back anyway. Now, here's an example. Stamina doesn't recover while you're blocking, so I'll hold block. You see my bar's not going up? Now I'll cast it. And my stamina is going up. Now, you can't spam it, because we don't have that much, but you can use it where it counts. It's understanding that skill that's more important than anything. Dual wheels. Get every single one of these. You're going to need every single one. They help towards your sustain. They help towards your damage. They all help in some way or another. They also help you do more damage the lower the target's health based on what abilities you're using. So if you're using Blood Craze or Deadly Cloak or Steel Tornado, which I'll get to in a second, or any of these skills, including your lights and heavies, you will do more damage the lower the target's health. Increases your weapon damage of your second hand weapon. Of course, our second weapon actually does less damage, so this will help push that. Also reduces the cost, which is nice. Gives you a 15% damage bonus to anything that's immobilized, disorientated, or silenced, which is also really nice. And of course, there are some vital passives to pay attention to here. I'm using an axe and a dagger. Now I know it looks like I'm using 2 maces, but that's because it's a costume. I'm using an axe and a dagger. The dagger will give me an increased crit rating, and of course the axe will give me an 8% chance to put a bleed damage over time effect on the target. Now 12k almost over 6 seconds without all the buffs on and everything that goes through resists and ignores them is absolutely mental. It's really, really strong. It looks like the proc chance is not very high, but it actually fires off all the time. It's really, really good. The bow, again, make sure you get every single one of these. They will help you have increased crit. They'll reduce the cost of your skills. They will give you bonuses based on how far or how close you are to the target. And also, this is also very important, but this will also help you evade as well. Now, I'll get to this one first of all. If you dodge roll, you run faster for 5 seconds. That helps a lot. So keep an eye on that one. The other one is, of course, Hawkeye. For every light or heavy attack that you throw out, your damage to your bow's abilities are increased by 5%, which stacks up to 5 times. Now, if you look at my timers here, you can see the Hawkeye passive sitting there with a counter of 4 on it. That stays with you as long as the timer is running. As soon as that timer runs out, it resets. Now, on some builds, you might want to use the full duration of that, get it up to 5, and keep it there. This particular setup, we normally only hit maybe 2 or 3 of those procs, and then we're on the front bar by then anyway. That is with good reason. If you overdo it, your other dots will run out, and it's not worth even boosting it. But I'll show you how to work that one when I get to the rotation. Now, light armor. I am wearing one piece of light armor, so I do get these passives, but you don't necessarily need them. This is just a little bit of help. Minor percentages, but then that's kind of what the game is about. They do add up. But to start with, don't panic. You want to really get all your points in medium, but you will need these later on. If you've got spare skill points, go for it. If you don't, focus on your medium first. However, this will increase your recovery for each piece worn. We're wearing 1, so we get 4%. This will also reduce the cost of your magicka abilities by 2% because we're wearing 1 piece. And of course, it will give us a small amount of resist as well. Now, we are using this, and we are using this. They both cost magicka, so we do want the cost down. We do want to recover so we can still use them efficiently. So they are quite important, but again, they're not the most essential skills. The most essential ones are these ones. Now, every single one of these will benefit you towards your damage and your sustain. This is to give you more crit chance. This will give you increased recovery based on all the pieces of medium you're wearing, so 4% per piece, giving us a 20% increase overall. Also reduces the cost of your abilities. Also reduces the cost of your sneaking if you're sneaking around, which you might be. Increases our weapon damage. This is essential. You need to be wearing 5 pieces of medium to take advantage of this, and of course we are. And this will increase your movement speed while sprinting based on how many pieces you're wearing, and the reduction to cost when dodge rolling. And of course, since we're not a magicka class, we block with our stamina bar, we dodge roll with our stamina bar, we do damage with our stamina bar. We need to make sure that our costs are down as much as possible. Magicka, obviously you dodge roll and block and break free with the stamina, but you do your damage and shields with the magic. We're using everything on one bar. You want this cost down as much as you can. You can go 7 pieces if you want, but personally 5 is absolutely fine for me, especially once we get to the CPs, because you'll see that I've got a lot of dodge roll reduction as well in there. Okay, heavy armor. This one here will give you increased resistance. It's not massive, but it does help. Constitution will increase your health recovery, which isn't that important, but because we are wearing 1 piece of heavy, we do get 108 magicka and stamina back once every 4 seconds if we're taking damage. Doesn't look a lot on paper, but it does add up eventually. It's really, really nice. And above all, we are using 1 piece of heavy, so we do want to get that extra 2% health bonus. Again, doesn't look a lot on paper, but once you stack all these bonuses up, they really add up, especially since we're in Imperial and we get a nice health bonus. That's now coming in a second. Vampire is insane. This will increase your magicka recovery and your stamina recovery by 10%, which is awesome. And of course, the undeaf passive, while you are low health, you take less damage. So while under 50%, you take less and less and less damage the lower you go. It's very, very strong indeed. It makes you tanky at low health and it takes the pressure off your healers. Also, you do need to be a stage 3 or above to take advantage of this. I'm always a stage 4 because I'm quite comfortable with it. But if you are worried, the main thing that people scream about as a vampire is fire damage. Now, I've explained this a million times before in exactly the same way, but this is what you need to do. If it is in a circle on the ground, very simple, step out of it. Or block and step out of it, whichever. If it's in a straight line, it's aiming at your feet, move out of the way. And if it's aiming at you like an arrow or a fireball or something like that, you have 2 options, block or dodge roll. It is up to you to stay out of the fire, and 9 times out of 10, whether you're a vampire or not, the fire will one-shot you in most mechanics. It's either very, very strong or it will kill you in 1 hit. So vampire or not, you need to be careful of fire. Now, something that is also very important towards that is that if you do get caught with it and it's not a one-shot, your passive here, even though it's fire, this one here will contribute. You will take less damage and you are less likely to die. It's very, very strong indeed. You need to understand the mechanics before you scream about your resistance. This is really, really strong. Fighters Guild. Let's see. Now, Intimidating Presence. You are going to want this because Beast Trap is quite expensive. You want to make sure you reduce the cost by 15%, so then we can use this more often, which we will be using it all the time. Hello. I don't know who that is. Slayer, you're going to want this. For having Fighters Guild abilities on your bar, you get 3% extra damage. Extra weapon damage, I might add. So, for this one on your bar, you get 3%. And you get 3% for this as well. Although we get 5% for the skill, we get a further 3% from the passive. So that's why it's there. We get an actual 8% overall for having this on the bar. It's very, very nice indeed. Also, this is very, very important. When you kill undead, Daedra, or werewolves, as long as you got the kill and blow, you get 9 ultimate back. That not only helps towards our damage because we can use our ultimate more often, but it also helps towards our sustain because when we use our ultimate, we get stuff back. Very, very important. The other ones are minor passives. They're not that essential to the build itself, but that one is very important for sure. Next, Major Skill is not important. Thieves Guild isn't. Undaunted is essential. Get this as soon as possible. And this. Start with this one first of all. when you take a synergy, you get 4% of your max health, stamina, and magic back. So for picking up a synergy, which by the way is a beneficial thing, it's not aggressive to you, it's not dangerous, so stop being so scared of them. I've seen people run away from synergies and assume that they're just for the tank, or they're just for the healer, or they're just for who else. Take them. As soon as you see them, take them. You've got bone shields, which will protect you and your group. You've got novas and conduits and stuff on the ground, which will do damage, especially if you're a DPS, because they scale off of your max stat, so you do more damage to them. And you've got all those kind of shininess. You've also got blood funnel as well, blood altar. This here, if someone's got one of these on the ground, you see the blood funnel synergy come up, it will heal you. Take the bloody synergies, and for doing so, you will get stuff back as well. Not only does it help your performance, but it also increases your sustain. Very, very important stuff. And also, if you see a spear, pick that up as well. Everyone's on cooldown anyway, so they can just throw another spear. Increases your max health, stamina, and magicka by 2% for each type of armor worn. We are using 1 heavy, 1 light, and 5 medium. So we are using 3 different types of armor, heavy, light, and medium. So for that, we get 6% across the board to our magicka, stamina, and max health. So you can see all these small percentages start adding up. We've been in here already. The only ones you need in here are for PvP anyway, so I won't go over those in this video. We are an Imperial. Of course, that one's quite nice. 1% increased gold, whatever. Toughness, or tough even, increases your maximum health by 12%. We are a stamina DPS. We want as much health as we can get without reducing our damage. This comes for free. 12% increase to max health, which is why we have 20.7. It's massive. Conditioning increases your max stamina by 10%. This is exactly the same as the Red Guard passive, so we dish out exactly the same amount of damage. So this is absolutely fine, except we get 12% increased health at the same time. Very, very nice indeed. And no, we don't have a recovery bonus, but we don't need it because we're using heavy attacks all the time. You'll see in the rotation in a moment when I go over that we do not struggle with our sustain at all based on the way the rotation is made. And finally, your melee attacks, your lights and your heavies, have a 10% chance to restore 6% of your max health. So for hitting stuff, especially heavies, we get stamina back and we can heal off it. It's chance based, of course, but we can heal off it. It's very, very nice indeed. And this is based off of your max health. So the more max health you have, the stronger this is. 20k health is actually a pretty decent heal from this. Also, this can be improved by different versions of heal and receive. So you can have heal and received in your CPs or in your gear if you have any, which we don't. You can have heal and received from buffs and bonuses and sets. You can have minor and major vitality and all that kind of shininess. That all stacks with this as well, so you can actually get a much, much larger heal once all the buffs are flying around. One more passive I'm going to go over. This is the most important one in the game in my opinion, and that is medicinal use. I am using potions a lot. They're crafted. They do last a long period of time, but they don't last 100% of the time, shall we say, straight out the box. But if we get medicinal use, then our potions last 47 seconds instead of around 36. The cooldown for potions is 45 seconds, which means if you do the maths on it, we can basically pop a potion every single time it runs out and have 100% uptime on our buffs, which is where I'm going now. Our potions I'm using are these. Essence of Weapon Power, this will give us Major Brutality, increasing our weapon damage by 20%. Major Savagery, increasing our crit chance by a further 10%. We do have this on the front bar, but if we have this running, we have it on both. And also gives us stamina back, of course, and gives us an increase to recovery for 20% for 47 seconds also. As you can see, like I said, the cooldown's 45 seconds. So this will run for the whole duration, then you can reapply it again and just keep those buffs up all the time. Now to make these, you need Blessed Thistle, Wormwood, and Dragonthorn. They're not necessarily cheap, but if you do a lot of Telvar farming or anything like that, or you got some friends that do, then you can buy these little pouches in the sewers, and you can get lots and lots and lots of flowers to make your potions with. Failing that, you can just buy them off the market. It's entirely up to you. But they're the ones I use. Now, I'm going to get into the gear, which I'm sure some of you are already aware of. But I'm going to go over them anyway, and then I'm going to explain how they work, and then I'm also going to show you some alternatives. Did miss one skill, by the way. One skill, just before we go into the gear. In here. Steel Tornado. Third one down, starts off as Whirlwind, more for the Steel Tornado. If you are in a situation or a dungeon or something where you've got a lot of damage in your group, adds are dying really, really fast around you, you can get rid of this for the time being and replace it with Steel Tornado and do a little bit of spinning to win. Make sure you keep your heavy attacks up occasionally though, because it is expensive. I wouldn't recommend it in a group where the damage is low, because you're going to overspam this and stuff isn't going to die quick enough and you're going to run out of juice. But if it's a really, really fast run and things are dying left, right and center, then there's no harm in slotting that. I also use that in Maelstrom, but that's a completely different story. Now, gear. Need to charge it. Whoops. I am, of course, still using the Red Mountain. 5 pieces. I'm using the Poison enchant on the main weapon. Now, the main weapon can be an axe or a dagger. It doesn't matter which order it's in. But what does matter is that you have your main hand weapon as the known-honed one. It's very, very important because your offhand does less damage. So you want to make sure that you get the biggest bonus on your main hand. So this one, first of all, I'm using a dagger. You can use an axe. It's fine. Switch them around. I'm using a known-honed dagger in the main hand with a poison glyph. I'm using an infused axe on the offhand with a weapon and spell damage glyph. Now the reason I'm using the infused is because this will mean that our glyph is stronger, giving us more weapon damage. And of course, the cooldown on these glyphs is 1 second after it finishes. Basically, it's a 6-second cooldown. So once you apply it, once it activates, you count down from 6. Now obviously this lasts 5 seconds, so we're going to have a gap. However, with infused, it reduces the cooldown, it increases the strength, and as soon as this hits 0, you can reapply it again. So we can have 100% uptime on this if we're lucky. You probably won't. You probably have somewhere between 80 and 90% uptime, but it's a lot more than you would have if it wasn't infused. This is very, very important. Now, what the Red Mountain does, by the way, is 2 weapons and 3 body pieces, or 2 weapons and 3 jewelry. Up to you which way round you go. But it gives us weapon damage, which will obviously dramatically increase our light and heavy attacks, as well as contributing towards our skills. We have stamina, which the opposite effect, it actually contributes a lot towards our skills and not so much towards lights and heavies. And we have crit chance, which is quite nice. But when you deal damage with a weapon ability, you have a 10% chance to spawn a volcano that erupts after 1 second, launching liquid hot magma at the closest enemy, dealing almost 10k damage. Flame damage specifically. And this can happen once every 2 seconds. 2 seconds is a very short period of time, and that fireball that flies out is very, very, very strong indeed. And that's part of the whole the fire idea as to why it's called Murder of Fire. The murder part comes from the crows, which I'm getting to in a second. See if we can make this proc. We'll fire it at you. There you go. That just flew out of the ground. That's the Red Mountain, and that will fire all the time. There you go. It's going again. It's still going. Very, very powerful indeed. Now, Maelstrom bow on the back bar. I am using a poison. I'm going to get to that in a second. Nernhone specifically, because we're using Nernhone on the front. We might as well use an Nernhone on the back. We don't need to be sharpened because we're going to be hitting pen cap in trials and stuff anyway, hopefully. If not, I've got another option for that for you in a moment. The poison I'm using is made with Nightshade, Nernroot, and God, what was the other one? Fleshfly Lava. Those 3 combined, with whichever poison water you can use at the time, depending on your level, is what I'm using here. It's very, very strong indeed. It does 2 poison damage over time effects, which, of course, as you know, our damage over time is quite strong, but they can both proc a poison status effect as well, which, as you know, as I mentioned a moment ago, does also get increased because we're a Dragonknight. So these are really, really powerful, especially on the DK. Now, the bow, by the way, if you don't have the Maelstrom bow, do not panic. You can put on a crafted one. You can put on one of the Red Mountain. You can put on one of the other sets. Entirely up to you. But I would aim for the Maelstrom bow as soon as possible. We are using 2-piece Vulcan Scoria, 1 light, 1 heavy. Now, the resists for the helmet and the shoulder are identical, regardless of which order they are in. You can have two heavy, and they'll both have the same resist. 2 light, they both have the same resist. So what we do is we use 1 here in any order. Doesn't matter that this one is the chunky one and this one isn't, or vice versa. What does matter is what you put on the traits, because this is considered a big piece. So we want infused on it so that we get the most stamina bonuses we possibly can. This is considered small regardless of the resists, so we put divines on this one. Now, if that was a little confusing, what I mean basically is if this was heavy and if this was heavy, their stats are the same, but their glyph bonus is different. So that's why it doesn't matter which way around the light or the medium or the heavy goes. It's up to you. Also, what this does, again, 8% chance while doing a damage over time effect to launch a meteor out of the sky and hit the target with a 5-second cooldown. That stacks alongside of the Red Mountain because that's fired a different way. Now let's see if we can get a dot on this dude. Come on. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to get the wrong set firing off instead. Let's find something we can hit. You. Boom! There you go. That meteor that just fell out of the sky, that's your Vulcan scoria. So we've got a volcano at the ground, and we've got a meteor out of the sky. Then we've got Unfathomable Darkness. I'm sure you've seen the budgies flying around already. That's what I'm calling them. They are crows, of course, hence the murder title. Oh, this, by the way, gives you max health as well. So it's very, very nice for your tankiness and increases your heals from your lights and heavies because you have more health. Weapon crit, which is chance, by the way, not damage. Don't be confused by that. Physical penetration, so we do more damage because we go through the target's resists. And we also have weapon damage as well, which again contributes to our lights and heavies more than our skills, but it's very nice regardless for both. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to call a murder of crows around you for 12 seconds, and every 3 seconds one will be sent to peck the closest target for X amount of damage with a 15-second cooldown. It lasts for 12 seconds, 15-second cooldown from as soon as it's active. So you have a 3-second cooldown overall, but technically there's no cooldown as such if you time it right. What I mean by that is, as soon as it fires, it will fire off one peck straight away. Every 3 seconds it will fire off another. So we've got 4. And then on the last one, count down from 3 and it can start again. So we can keep that up quite a lot if we keep our rotations up. But there most likely will be a gap. Very, very strong. But anyway, we'll get to the less confusing part. Infused on all the big pieces. Head, chest, legs, all infused. Everything else divines. Everything else. You can have the jewelry of the Red Mountain or the jewelry of the Unfathomable Darkness. It's entirely up to you. But as long as you have 5 and 5 on the front bar all the time. So you have to make sure that your weapons are obviously one or the other. But it's up to you which ones they are. Now, weapon damage on all the jewelry. That's very, very important. You don't want recovery on there because you don't need it. And of course, you need to glyph these for stamina as well because they don't come with stamina. Light comes with magic and heavy comes with health. Now this will kind of, as you can see, contribute to everything. We have the birds flying out, we have the meteor out of the sky, we have the lava out of the ground, and they all fire off of our abilities. Whether they be dots, single target, or just skills in general. And now I'm going to show you how to put this all together. First of all, I'm going to go to my house, and then I'll explain how the rotation works. Also, this is very, very easy to use as far as damage application is concerned because you don't really have to do that much. There is a rotation, but if you're not following your rotation and you got your skills running, you'll still hit really hard. Okay, now this is possibly going to sound a little bit complicated to start with, but I will put this on the website as well. I'll write down the rotation and all that shininess, so it's all there. But basically, to start with, you want to make sure that your beast trap is down on the ground. Onto your back bar. Start with Endless Hail. Now hold your heavy, but don't do a full heavy attack. Basically spam your poison injection, which I've got on my triangle, until it releases itself. Then you'll get a kind of a medium and a poison injection together. Then light attack, molten armaments, and then light attack caltrops. So we'll do that again. Endless Hail, hold heavy, press poison injection. Light attack, molten, light attack, caltrops, swap. Now, every second rotation, do not fire molten armaments. You only do it every first or every second, whichever way around you want to count it, but you only do it every 2 rotations. That way you'll keep a constant uptime on minor brutality, and this will be always running as well. It's very, very important. On your front bar, however, this is where it gets really easy. So, volley, hold heavy, poison injection, click, molten, click, caltrops, swap. Okay, on your front bar, full heavy attack, venom claw, then a full heavy attack, then blood craze, then a light attack, deadly cloak, light attack, flames of oblivion, light attack, beast trap, swap. Now, if you are low on resources, we can make that a little bit cleaner, and basically a full heavy with venom, full heavy with blood craze, full heavy with deadly cloak, then light, flames, light, beast trap, swap. Start the back bar again, full heavy, almost, poison, light, caltrops. Now notice I missed molten armaments out there, because you only do it once every second rotation. That helps your sustain and your buff up time. Now I'm going to show you on the skeleton now, briefly how this works, then I'll show you a full rotation and how it actually looks all in one. But this is where it gets a bit nuts, because obviously if I'm just swinging weapons around, it looks like I'm just throwing out a rotation. There are 3 proc sets attached to this, and they're all interlock to each other as far as the rotation is concerned to take advantage of every single one. And this is how it works. So I'm going to do this quite slowly to start with. So Beast Trap swap, volley or endless hail, hold, poison injection, light attack, caltrop, swap, heavy venom claw, heavy blood craze, light deadly, light flames, light beast trap, swap. Now that looks a bit nuts because there's so many fireworks going off, I know. But that's in a nutshell how you do it. You might want to rewind that and go again, but I will be writing it down, do not worry. Now, I'm going to show you a trick with a heavy attack. I know people want to know how to animation cancel with certain things. There's lots of different ways to do it. But for example, Beast Trap animation cancel. It's the last one on this rotation on purpose. Once it's there, you press it, swap. You basically swap weapons as he presses it. On the back bar, our last ability is caltrops. As soon as you've activated this, swap bars again. You'll notice that I'm on my front bar while that's in the air. You have to be quick. So Beast Trap swap, caltrop swap. That's how you do those two abilities. Molten Armaments, that can be sped up as well. So instead of doing a full cast, the second you press it, hit block very fast. Don't hold block, just tap it. And it'll do that. 1, 2, really quickly. Now that will take some time to get used to, but that's how you slow that down, or sorry, speed that up. There's one more, and that's your heavy attack. How do you get your heavy attack stamina back and cut the time out at the same time? Because you do a full heavy, and then a skill. You see I glowed green there? Glowing green is you getting your stamina back. What you do is you hold heavy attack. Just hold it and press the skill before your heavy attack is finished. So as soon as you hold that button, press Venom Claw. So if I start holding now, I've already pressed it. See what it did there? It did like half the animation and then the skill. That's because while holding a heavy, you can actually queue up an ability. So if I do it now, I'm going to hold heavy and press Rendon straight away. And then let go of control. See, it does it for you. He doesn't do a full swing like this, because that's really long. He does half of one. So just hold it, hit the button. Hold it, hit the other button. Hold it, hit the next skill. You can basically hold heavy attack for 3 whole skills as long as you queue them up in between. So, let's do one more round of the animations, or the rotation even, and then I'll show you what this looks like on a proper pass. By the way, on the test itself, I have someone throwing in a taunt, because every DPS test I see out there has a taunt or a elemental drain. Let's not fool ourselves into considering that that's just for recovery. It's not. That is a debuff. It's major fracture if it's physical, and it's major breach if it's magic. So everybody does get that. What I will show you, however, is that I'm only getting around 9k penetration. I'm not cheesing it with lover stuff. I'm not going full penetration to try and show how high we can get the numbers and then change our sets when we actually turn up to the door. I'm using exactly what I would be using, and then consider that there are going to be buffs coming to improve it. So we'll go over this very quickly. Beast Trap swap, Endless Hail, like Poison, Caltrops swap, Heavy Venom, Heavy Blood Craze, Heavy Deadly, Light Flame, Light Beast Trap swap, Volley, Poison, Molten, Light Caltrops, Heavy Venom, Heavy Blood Craze, Light Deadly, Light Flame, Light Beast Trap swap. Now I showed you 2 different ones there. One was with 3 heavies, one was with 2. Whichever one you're more comfortable with, it's up to you, and also depends on the situation. But you can do 3 heavies on the front, or you can do 2, and you'll still be fine either way. Now your ultimate, always use that once you've got your buffs and dots and everything running. So when you get on the back bar, just before you swap, throw it down. There's the banner, by the way, if I didn't already show that. Now, before I show the demonstration, there is an option for change. You can alter this setup if you want. The whole point of it is murder of fire. It's supposed to have crows and fire and craziness, and be viable and sustain and be usable, if you like, in all content, which it can do. This is no problem in trials or dungeons or solo. Whatever you want to use it for, it will work. But you do have some choices. This obviously gives us more health plus the fire proc, which is nuts because it never misses. You cannot miss. It locks on. You can use Veladreth if you prefer. It will give you a tiny bit more weapon damage, and you get a proc which is disease damage instead of fire, of course, but has a 9-second cooldown. It can miss, but it has a 9-second cooldown instead of 5. Now, I've done lots and lots and lots of testing with this. Honestly, this is down to personal preference. it actually doesn't improve your DPS that much at all. It's somewhere between 200 and 600, at most almost 800 damage over a full pass. So it's very, very minimal. So if you're more comfortable with the health and you like to have the fun with the meteors and all the rest of it, these are so close to each other it's not even worth changing. Unless you really, really have to. It's up to you. Also, you can, surprisingly, use Zaan as well, which I think I put in the bank. I did. Which I know it's got spell crit on it, but the proc from it, from your lights and heavies, is so bloody strong it's actually on par with Veli and Valakhan Scoria on this particular build. It's really, really strong. Anyway, all that stuff aside, I'm now going to show you a proper rotation, and then you can judge the results by yourself. Okay, so hopefully that helped. Just note, by the way, we are using the Warrior Stone. Now, if you are not in a trial scenario, you do not have all the shiny debuffs and everything in place to count towards your penetration, so you can hit cap, which is 18,200. If you're not hitting that, at the moment, just as we are, we've got 9 with a taunt. So we've got 9 more to come from buffs. If you're not hitting those, and you're definitely not going to, maybe you're in Maelstrom, or you're in Dungeons a lot, or you're in VDSA, then I highly recommend taking off the Warrior and replacing it with the Lover, and you'll get around 2 or 3k more DPS out of it, if you're lucky. Not quite that all the time, but not far off it. But obviously, like I said, in a trial, if you've got all the shiny buffs, you won't need that. But if you don't have all the shiny buffs, however, if you're in one that's not fully optimized, you can get away with it. So it's up to you. Now, finally, we're going to get to the CPs. I did do this in a little bit reverse order, but this kind of make a little bit more sense now. So, I put 28 into Ironclad most of the time, because most single target hits that hit you are actually going to hit the tank. But if you do feel that you're a little bit squishy, you need to put some more into here, you can. These are not set in stone. This is just how I base it as I go. And then sometimes I change things out depending on the trial, the dungeon, the situation, whichever. But this is a good base. 75 points into Hardy, 75 points into Elemental Defender. These two here don't go any more than 75 points. If you do, it's going to take you 25 points to get to 15%, and it's really not worth it because you're going to be wasting points. Like if I spend 25 points extra here for 1%, I just lost 12% out of this almost. It's ridiculous. So don't go nuts. Diminished returns are very, very high. Also note, if you have to break free, you got this passive here. Throw out a Caltrops straight after is so much cheaper. Now, 51 points in a thick skin as well. Remember that these are damage types as a flat damage resistance. So you have physical, disease, poison, all that kind of stuff. And all your magic types as well. But this is a damage over time. So this is a damage type as well. And they do work with each other. So does this. So if you get hit with a physical direct damage ability, this will work with this. And all that kind of shiny stuff. Okay, this one is essential. You do it on every single build. You are going to be resurrecting people because people are going to die and you need them up off the ground. So put 11 points into here. You actually need 10, but put 11 points into here because then you'll get the jump point for this heal and receive bonus. But we want this passive here. While you're resurrecting people, you take less damage. Makes sense. Throw out a vigor first, then pick them up. 16 points into Warlord to reduce the cost of break free. Depending on the situation, you might want to put some more points into this, but I'm actually quite comfortable with it. 75 points into Tenacity, same again. If you want to put 25 points into here to get 15%, be my guest, but I honestly wouldn't do it because it's wasting points that you could put somewhere else. If you really think that you don't need points anywhere else, that's up to you, but I honestly wouldn't waste them. Same goes for this as well, 14% into Stam Recovery. I wouldn't put any more points into here. You get tiny bonuses for the ridiculous amount of points it's going to cost you to use. Diminished returns on these two are very, very high. Tumbling. 72 points into here, 23% reduction to dodge roll. Now I've been using this mostly because I've been in Fanglair, DSA, and of course Maelstrom quite a lot recently, and this has helped me a shit ton. It's really, really useful on a stamina. You do break free occasionally, but nowhere near as often as you have to dodge damage. So I really, really like this. But again, this is your own. This is down to your own personal preference. If you prefer to put these somewhere else, then that's entirely up to you. 2 points into Shadow Ward. Basically, I've hit all my jump points. I've got no points to put anywhere apart from these two, and they won't benefit me in any of the trees I've already got because I won't hit a flat percentage. So 1% of this is better than nothing at all. Nothing in here. 19 points into Physical Weapons Expert, giving us a 12% increase to our light and heavy attacks. Also, Master at Arms, increasing the damage done with direct damage attacks as well. All of our procs are direct damage, and so are our light and heavies. Now, there was something I saw a while back about lights and heavies not actually benefiting from this. Depends on the damage type. If you're using direct hits, it will. If you're using a stream, it won't. So if you get yourself a lightning staff, for example, and put points into Master at Arms, and you do a full heavy attack, you won't get a bonus. But if you do a light attack, where it's an actual direct hit, it will. So just bear that in mind for other setups as well. Depends on what damage type you're actually doing. But these two together do stack quite nicely, and of course, because we've got 75 points in here, our lights and our heavies, while the target is under 25% health, actually do more damage. So we have a passive execute as well. Not only do our dual wield abilities hit harder at low health, but our actual lights and heavies do as well. Which is handy because DKs specifically don't have an execute. We just have our dots and stuff from our weapon skill lines and all that kind of stuff. 40 points into Thaumaturge. I normally go more into this for DKs because of all the dots. However, we are using a lot of procs, a lot of single target hits as well. So I've balanced these out alongside each other. 64 into Mighty to boost all of our physical and poison and disease damage, which we're doing a lot of. 26 into Precise Strikes. The reason I don't have too much into crit here is because our crit is kind of midpoint, 51%. It's not too high, it's not too low, and most of our stuff, like our procs at least, can't actually crit. So I balance this out to just push what we do have and not waste it on stuff that we don't. 35 points into Pearson as well. This will give us 3k penetration alongside the 1.4k we have on our set, which will put us to 4.4. If you introduce a taunt to that, that will put us to 9.6, which will then kind of put us just under the 10k mark, meaning that we've still got room for buffs. Okay, so hopefully that helped. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. If you do have any questions, please put them in the comment section below. I do normally answer every single question that I can, although occasionally a couple slip through. Don't forget also, keep your rotation clean, keep your heavy attacks coming, keep your buffs up, and above all, keep some damage on something, because if you do, this will happen. Even if I'm doing nothing now, just leave the dots running. Look at that. Fireworks. How fun is that? Hits like a steam train as well. Okie dokie. So, first of all, thank you all very, very much for watching. If you're not subscribing, please do so. It is free. Also, if you'd like to support the channel outside of YouTube, there are some links in the description for Patreon, for Facebook, for Twitter, and of course the website XynodeGaming.com. Once again, thank you all very, very much for watching, and bye-bye.